Navarro, and I'm really thrilled to be here. You know, I've lived in LA since I got out of high school, and LA radio at one point in time was the best radio in the world, where you had a multitude of rock stations, a multitude of all kinds of stations before everything went bland and everything went Spanish. So when I heard about this, I mean, I used to listen to the whole KMET gang. I was upset when they went to the wave, when they changed to New Age and later smooth jazz. So for me, it was just about support my local rock family. I'm seeing a lot of old friends. We're all here to help Pat and do something for our community, to kind of remember that we are a cohesive unit and we have more in common with each other than anybody else on the planet. I'm thrilled to be here, man.
Well, talk about growing up in LA at that time, how you got introduced to so many new artists and new music, and the radio personalities would talk about the music. It wasn't just about the commercial end of the...
Well, I didn't grow up in Los Angeles. I was born here. I wasn't raised here. I was raised in an area that had one AM radio station, and that was the ball game. Played nothing but straight top 40. It's a little bit...
Where did you move here?
I moved here in 1969 when I graduated high school. I'm an old guy.
Great time.
It was an amazing... Oh, the whole drive up to UCLA, where I started school, was the same day that Abbey Road debuted. So I listened to it repeatedly on the radio on the entire drive up on AM radio. Well, when I got here, it's a little bit like you get a guy who's had nothing but hamburgers and suddenly you show him a smorgasbord. When I got here to Los Angeles and the variety of radio and the sort of war between KLOS and KMET, frankly, was great for listeners because there was variety and there was energy. I loved it. I was a KMET guy. When KMET went away, I went over to KLOS, but I really kind of landed at K-Rock when that happened. And then about 2 years after KMET went away, I went kind of acoustic, and that changed everything. I wound up with with my own record deal and all of that stuff. But the KMET days, was really characterized by my late partner and I wrote We Belong for Pat Benatar, and they were extremely supportive. I'll be finishing my show tonight with that.
Tell us about how the song evolved and getting it to Pat.
Well, Eric and I had been in a band together here in Los Angeles, tried to get a deal. It wasn't going very well. And we had reached a point where we were at the end of our rope as partners. And so we didn't speak for a couple months. And then one day he calls up and says, let's write a song just for the hell of it. I was kind of mad. I was kind of bitter about the way things had kind of broken up. But I figured I'd do it anyway. And in the course of 90 minutes, we wrote this song that we just listened to and went, something bizarre here. This is like when I think it was Ralph Boston or Bob Beamon, the long jumper, who broke the world record by 2 feet. It's like we hit one out of the park and we knew it, but we didn't know what would happen. We just thought it was the best song we'd ever written. Eric started hitting publishers religiously and didn't listen to me. I said, whatever you do, man, don't put that We Belong ballad on there. It's a ballad. Don't do that. He ignored me. He put it on the tape, and through a fluke of a couple of circumstances, ended up in Jamie Cohen at EMI Records, gave it to Tom Sturgis at EMI Music, who sent it to Ron Fair over at Chrysalis Records, who sent it to Pat Benatar, and she pulled it out of a box of tapes. As fluky as that. And exactly 1 year after we wrote it, it was top 5 all over the world. Changed our lives.
First time you heard it on the radio?
Well, after I pulled into the gas station to soil myself, no, it was the most bizarre feeling to, well, I mean, and this kind of speaks to what we're here for. To me, the radio was where amazing stuff came out of. The notion of me putting into radio didn't make sense at the time. And to hear something that I'd written from the heart with my best friend come out of the radio was the most profound feeling I'd ever had. And we were terrified, but we were also excited. We became part of the community instantly, and we dove head first. Started another band, it didn't work. Then we started our duo, it did. It's been 25 years since my first record came out. And
where were you when you heard it on the radio?
First time I heard it on the radio, I was driving down the street. First time I heard it on the radio, I was at my office job, and they were announcing the debut. And I had a pretty intense job in advertising, small agency. So I got the entire staff together in my office, about 10 of us, turned on the radio, we listened to it. A couple of the girls are crying. The guys are sitting there with big old smiles. And when it was over, I went, all right, everybody back to work. And I left the company 6 months later and dove head first into being a full-time musician and songwriter and doing what I'm doing and having a great time.
What's the thing you miss the most about that time when radio really exposed art and really was the voice of the generation? The competition among radio stations, in my opinion, led to more adventurous playlists. It led to really trying to reach an audience. There isn't a lot of that right now. You know, KLOS is doing classic rock. They're not playing new stuff. They're a good station. You know, who knows where you're really going to hear something brand new. So frankly, in Los Angeles, I kind of focus on Sirius XM.
where I can, because I like the surprise of not knowing what's coming next. You know, I can program stuff on iTunes, I can go to Spotify, I can do all of that. You know, Pandora isn't quite the thing for me, but SiriusXM works for me because I get to hear something fresh and exciting. Those days are gone from LA radio, but clearly thousands of us remember what it was like, and it was vibrant.
You know, it's great to have these memories, and even for a night to be able to rekindle, you know, that energy. But we hope that there's some platform, some angle, something in the future that's going to give us this.
There's a platform. There's a platform because what's happened in the course of the sort of demise of record sales and the kind of caving in of radio is that it's all about live. It's all about live. And so here we are, a bunch of us from different cuts and colors of pop and rock here in Los Angeles, supporting Pat Kelly and doing this and playing out in front of people, and it's packed out there. You know, I mean, I'm doing nearly 100 shows a year now. The live situation is fantastic. They're small, but I have fun and it's good. So there's a way to keep going. The old system's gone, but the demand for music, the desire to hear that stuff hasn't gone down at all. So we just got to kind of find our way through the minefield. What I like about this is that we're doing it together.
Yeah. What advice do you give that young songwriter, that young player today?
Well, the first advice is quit. If you can't quit, then you don't really need advice. But just do everything you can to be as good as you can. Dig deep. Don't settle for okay. Don't listen to something and go, yes. Get analytical and try to figure out how you can make it better and better and better and better. And just don't stop.
My name is Lindsay Guerrero.
So you go back to the interview show. Tell us how you got that gig with Jim Ladd.
Okay, so this was the spring of 1977. I was finishing up graduate school of education at UCLA. I was going to be a teacher, and I really hated it. I just didn't like it. And I went from UCLA to visit a friend from high school down in Redondo Beach, and we took acid. And went to a party and had a great time. And I was really very, very high, about 2 in the morning, and I had to drive back to Westwood. Picked up a guy hitchhiking on Pacific Coast Highway, and I talked the whole way because it had a lot of speed in it. And he said, well, what do you do? I'm in graduate school and student teaching. I hate it. And he says, what do you like to do? I said, I like music. I like, I've written screenplays and, on and on and on. And he says, funny little guy. He says, I just loaned money to a company that does things like I think you're interested in. Here's my card. Call me on Monday, which I did. I took him from Hermosa Beach to Westwood, and I called him the next day. He gave me the number. A week later, I met Jim Ladd's partner, and 2 weeks later, I got the job as the office boy, where I learned how to put a show together. Watching Bill Levy, the engineer, was very good. Taught me about engineering. Was there for 2 years. Then I worked with Robert W. Morgan for a year. Learned how to write, and then I went to Westwood One, and I worked there about 13 years, and was the senior producer. So,
were all the interview shows done at the studio, or a lot were done in the field?
He was the best at what he did that I've ever seen. He would set up a special. He wouldn't go to a record company. He would have a special. They'd get a hotel. We'd get a hotel. We'd get a hotel. You get a hotel room. He would find out what the artist liked to eat and drink, and he'd have it ready to go. He would make them feel at home, and that's why the interviews were so good. It was you were eavesdropping on a conversation that, I listened to the show for 2 years before I worked, a year and a half, 2 years before I worked on it, and I was eavesdropping on a conversation I would never have been able to eavesdrop on if it wasn't for that show.
Talk about some of the highlights. Talk about some of the artists that just super memorable.
When I was working, is that what listening or working?
As a part of the show.
When it was summer of '77, Silk Degrees, Boz Scaggs' album, was the biggest album. It was so big, and Jim interviewed Boz Scaggs, and it was so terrific.
Is it a hotel room?
It was, yeah. They got a hotel room and everything. I wasn't allowed to go.
Yeah.
And then the other highlight, my first real involvement in the show was the company was having financial problems. This was summer of '78. I mean, literally 2 weeks, 3 weeks would go by, no paycheck, no money. But we all believed, and we hung in there, and they got a contract to do a show, a 6-part history of FM radio, 6 hours. And we got a contract with MCA Records to advertise the FM soundtrack, the movie FM. It was the soundtrack, and that saved the company. It was, and it was I got to do all, I researched, as you know, background, and that was my first involvement, and it was such a terrific show. It was such a terrific show. I don't remember anything ever generating that much buzz, because it ran for 6 weeks straight, and the anticipation for the next episode, the next chapter. It was great. It was great.
Tell us what the average person might not know about the man, Jim Ladd.
He used to be in a band. He used to play guitar. He showed me a picture once. He genuinely loves what he does, and I think that's what comes through on the air. He pulls you in as an individual. He's, you know, that's why he is who he is. So yeah.
So he has a real desire to help expose great artists.
Yes. You know about the White House thing? This was in and that's how Pat got his name, Paraquat. They were spraying Paraquat on marijuana.
In Mexico?
In Mexico, and I think pretty much everywhere they could find it. And, you know, nobody knew how it was going to make people sick or not make people sick. And so that was one of the things that Jim did, is he got involved in things like that. And he gave out the telephone number of the White House and had everybody call, and they crashed the White House switchboard. Call, complain about it.
Who was president?
It would have been,
was it Carter or before that?
It was Ford. It was President Ford, yeah. Am I right on that? 76? No, Carter was president.
Okay.
Was it? Yeah, 76 to 80. It was Carter. But they crashed. I'm trying to think when it was, because I believe it was 77, so it would have been Carter. Yeah, but they crashed the switchboard.
Amazing.
A friend said something once that was very interesting. We'd been out having some beer or something, and we're driving somewhere, and Jim was on the radio, probably 1 o'clock in the morning, and he was playing what sounded like real serious music, and my friend said, "God, something big must have happened. You know, I can hear it in the music." So he was the beacon. He was a beacon. Something happened. He was, when John Lennon was shot, which was 80, but December 6th, 7th, I think. No, December 8th, yeah. I was at work. I was at Westwood One doing a show that had to be done that night. We heard about it on, we had the football, Monday Night Football on.
Howard Cosell.
Yes, and my engineer came on. He said, "Man, I just heard something. Come, you got to hear this." And so we had to finish the show, and I went home, and first person I called was Jim, and just didn't have to say a word. I said, "Jim, it's Lindsay," and he says, "Wow," and I said the same thing, and that was, that. It was, and I think everybody who listened would have wanted to call, and I don't recall listening to him that night. I'm sure I did, but I was sort of, in my own, in my own cold cloud of uncertainty at that point. And he, everybody, he was communicating with everybody. That's who we listened to. I was lucky enough to know him and pick up the phone and talk to him for a couple of minutes, and then, okay, man, I'll talk to you later. But he did that for everybody listening in Southern California. He did that for everybody. So.
Well, obviously, radio's changed so dramatically. We're talking about the era of when the DJs really controlled what they played and had a voice.
Sure.
What do you miss most about that classic freeform radio?
New music. I miss discovery. And now, since really nobody listens to the radio, there's no shared discovery. We used to hear, there's a new Aerosmith album. And so we would drive around and listen, and you knew it was going to come on. Something was going to come on. Yes, and we would say, yeah, gee whiz. And then you'd hear it, and you had all your friends there, 3, 4 friends in the car. Oh, no, that's it. Quiet, listen. And then we'd drive, and we'd listen, and then we'd say, wow. And then, be it, Jim, David Perry, Mary, whoever was on, would say, they'd tell us what we were listening to, and they'd tell us about the album. And they'd say, yeah, and we heard there might be a tour coming up in about 6 months, so, keep your eyes peeled.